And hello, you guys. I'm Rick Dancer. Welcome to Get Real with Rick Dancer. And tonight we have a great topic. I hope it interests you because it should. This is like one that's near and dear to my heart, has been for a long time. Voting reform. Anything I can do to change the process and make it more fair so that we have some candidates that look and think more like you and I do, people in the middle. Not white people, not black people, all of us. Every time I say this, somebody comes after me with that. I'm looking for people, a way to get people who really want to represent us. And Mark Frohnmeyer is a guy, he and I have worked. We've talked for ages about opening the primary in Oregon. That never happened. Lots of big corporations, the parties, and the unions fight it. They don't want it open, which makes me always think, there must be a reason. Maybe we do need to open it. But tonight we're going to talk about a new voting procedure. It's not really new. It's been around. But Eugene, the city of Eugene, is looking at implementing star voting. And Mark's going to explain what that is for you in just a minute. Into the system. It's very controversial only because it's change. And change is always controversial, especially in Oregon sometimes, it feels like. So Mark's going to come on and talk to us, but let's get our sponsors on here. We want to make sure we got everybody recognized. We've got Chris Dental Family Dentist. Dr. Michael Bratland, he will absolutely love this topic because whether he agrees or not, he likes people to have conversation, to be talking, to be free to have conversation. He's one of our sponsors. If you're looking for a dentist who just wants to take care of your dental work and you get your political views, not his, he's your man. So get a hold of Dr. Michael Bratland. Also, Montana Oral Surgeons and Implant Center here in Montana. They're another client of ours. They have offices in Butte. Let me get this straight now. They're, every time I turn around, they're getting another office. Great Falls, Butte, Montana, Helena, Montana, and also Bozeman. So if you're looking for dental care and you work in this area, that's where you need to go. In Crestwell, Oregon, Range Heating and Air Conditioning, great people, love what we do. Called us and said, we want to sponsor you because you're talking about things nobody else will, and that's what we love. Also, Matt Carl with New Leaf Hyperbarics and Wellness Center just did a big expansion on their place. Now they have massage, they have light therapy, they have saunas, and the hyperbarics. If you've never tried it, you really need to. Go in. If you say it's from me, he gives you a discount when you walk the first time you come in after you watch us. So that's Matt McCarl. We appreciate his. And also here locally, Greg Hinkle. He's in transition into a new mortgage field here in Helena, Montana. And so we don't have a name yet for him, but we know Greg Hinkle, and I want to make sure he gets his plug. And I'll tell you more about him a little bit later. All right, let's get right on the topic. Mark Frohnmeyer, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. Good to see you, Rick.
You too, man. So Mark is in Eugene, Oregon, and you've been working on election reform of any kind.
Well, I've been thinking about it since 1990.
So what made you start thinking about it, Mark?
Well, as you know, my dad was in the political world. I was actually born into his first state campaign for state legislature. And some of my very earliest memories are, peering up over the crib and seeing people, canvas turfs all laid out on the floor.
So you learned to shake hands really early.
Yeah, sure. But he ran for governor in 1990. And that race was, I think it was a kind of a turning point in Oregon politics, and actually even nationally. That was sort of when the right wing of the Republican Party began to kind of flex its muscles. And my dad was a very moderate Republican, and so he was sort of there was a smoke-filled back room where the OCA came and said, "Hey, if you don't take position XYZ, then we're going to run a spoiler candidate against you and make sure that you lose," was essentially what they said. And of course, he told them no thanks, and that's exactly what they did. So
they brought Al Mobley, a guy came in and wasn't prepared to be a candidate. And I can say this because it's my show, so it's fair. Dave Frohnmeyer would have made a hell of a governor, and it was an ugly race. It was nasty, and Dave lost to Barbara Roberts, and the rest is history. But your dad went on to be very successful and do some really amazing.
Yeah, I think it was, I mean, I think for him, the transition to working at the university was probably a really good thing. But for, as a member of the family, kind of going through that process, and elections, I mean, I just got to say, I have a huge amount of respect for anybody willing to kind of step up and say, hey, I want to, slog through the rain and snow and all of the, all the commentary in order to serve my fellow people. Like that's something that I think is just, we need more of that, not less.
Right. And it'd be nice if you had more. I think we've scared so many, like your dad wouldn't be scared out of something like that, but we've frightened so many people. I mean, I did that, and you see what happens to your name, what happens to you. And so people, it's a rough go. It's a real rough go.
It's rough. It's rough on the families of people who run. Public service is really tough. And so, I think, but for me, what was such a challenge for me as a kid was that, I'd been, sort of drank the America democracy Kool-Aid at a young age. And it was, that was this moment of, this is the sort of the spoiled election where one side deliberately uses, kind of just the bad math of the plurality method in order to achieve, sort of to manipulate the outcome, was something where it was like, oh, I thought this was going to be, I thought this voting process gave us real majority preference and so on. And then, to come and find out in very personal terms that there was a significant bug in the process, was a rough awakening. And so that was, so I was 16 years old at the time, but that led me to just kind of go, how do we have a voting system that is truly fair for all the voters? And really,
your brother started working on something. You guys came up with plans, and I mean, you were really at a young age. You were doing
20 years later, finally came up with what I thought was the right idea, and this is 2011. With the concept of the unified primary. So, and you brought this up on the intro, the idea of opening up the primary process. The challenge is if you still limit people to one choice. I mean, the whole problem with our present system is that one choice limit, it's only fair if there are just two options.
Right.
Right. So if you're limited to one choice, it's only fair if there are two running. Anytime there's a third or a fourth, then the voters who like more than one candidate are at a huge disadvantage. Whoa, why did those balloons happen? That's cool.
I had no idea what that was. I touched nothing. But you know what, Mark? Maybe
you got some fancy software here, Rick.
Maybe it's just you talking about that. It's signifying the carnival which we've created in our voting.
Perhaps.
I honestly don't know what that was. I'm as baffled as you are. But continue.
but this this is something that has vexed voting scientists for many years, which is like, how do you come up with a voting system that's actually fair when there are more than two candidates running? And the initial idea of the unified primary, and this is, again, 2011 was when my brother and I first started, writing it up, was that you would have an open field primary, and then all the voters would be able to give an up or down on every candidate on the ballot, right? So I like this one and this one and this one. I don't like this one and this one and this one. Whatever you wanted to say yes or no to each candidate, you could. The two who got the most support would move on to the general election, and then people would be able to choose between those two. and put that under petition in 2013. For in 2011, I was like, oh, this is this idea could really work in terms of establishing equal voice for all of us in that political process. But it was kind of like, what would actually get people to care enough about something as nerdy as voting process reform to even get something rolling? And so it just sat on my hard drive for 2 years until the federal government shut down. And that was in 2013. That was the catalyst for launching the unified primary in the first place. And that there was ultimately a group of folks up in Portland who decided to rerun the open primary in 2014 instead of the unified primary. And I think that one, sort of once again didn't, Oregon has spoken out sort of resoundingly on that topic a couple of times now.
It's kind of like the sales tax.
Yeah.
It's got about as much chance as a snowball in hell of passing.
But the arguments that they brought up during that campaign, I mean, they all kind of came back to the issue of vote splitting, which is that if you have that one choice limit in the open primary, you actually make that vote splitting issue worse because you have more candidates.
Right.
So but at the same time, and some of the other criticisms that came, and this was more from the camp of people who were very strong proponents of a system called ranked choice, was that, and Rob Ritchie, who is the founder of Fair Vote, was very specific. He's like, look, if you do this unified primary thing and you narrow it down to 2 candidates in May, then it's just going to be more of the same, that basically the money and resources will pick one side or the other, and then it'll be, the alternate voices will get shut out before the election, which is the general election. And all of that thought was what, we ended up having a conference here in 2014 called the Equal Vote Conference, and luminaries from around the country who focus on election process reform all showed up to the University of Oregon Law School. And the sort of unlikely innovation out of that day was the invention of star voting,
Really?
which basically, and this was actually Rob who pulled me aside at the end of the conference, and he said, "Look, what if we did kind of a combined pilot idea that where you could approve of candidates on a ballot, which is basically what the first stage of the unified primary is. It's approval voting. And then you would also rank them so that when you did that runoff, you didn't have to go back and vote again. You would use the rankings for the runoff, and you'd use the approvals to determine who got into the runoff. And the problem that brings up as soon as you think about it is, what would that ballot look like? Because it's already, if you're ranking versus just choosing one, it's a more complicated thing. But now if you're doing both, I was just sort of like, well, that's a no-go, until, chewing on it with some folks who were, the founders of the Center for Election Science, we sort of realized that the score ballot, the 0 to 5 stars that we all use for every time you take an Uber or a Lyft or order a meal online or get something on Amazon, like that 0 to 5 star thing. It's so prevalent in our society today. But what it shows you, and this is so score voting, which is where you score candidates 0 to 5 or 0 to 9, and then just add up all the points, and whoever gets the most wins. That's been around for a long time. But I think the real insight that came out of that conference and discussion was that score also shows your preference.
Right.
If you give someone 5 and you give another candidate 4, you are saying, I prefer the candidate I gave a 5 to the candidate I gave a 4.
Right.
And where score voting kind of discards that preference expression, star uses both. So in this long time kind of, I guess there's been this long running debate between people who like the cardinal systems, which are scoring systems. A cardinal system is a measure of utility. And then the ordinal systems, which are first choice, second choice, third choice, right? If I say this is my first choice, this is my second choice, I'm not communicating anything about actually how much I like number one
Right.
versus number two, right?
Right. Right.
Could-
You're just saying here's 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, it could be my first choice, and then wow, that second choice, I really like that one almost as much as or equal to my first choice. Or this is my, kind of lesser evil that is only barely preferable to the zeros that are on my ballot. So the cardinal systems give you a lot more expression, right? They let you express not just an order of preference, but how much you like each one. And what STAR does is it combines those two. So it uses to determine the top two. It just says it's going to take the two candidates out there who are most supported by the whole electorate, and then what it does is it goes back and looks at the ballots again, and it says between those two, who's the majority favorite on the ballot between the top two. So STAR is a way of kind of combining the unified primary and an automatic runoff into a single vote, which means that instead of voting twice with two different electorates, the May electorate and the November electorate, everybody votes one time in November on all the candidates that are in the race. And again, this measure, by the way, is for local Eugene city offices. So
Right.
this is
your
mayor, city councilor, e-web commissioner. And right now, what we ask those candidates to do. So again, if you put yourself in the position of somebody who is stepping up for a city council office, who, they have to campaign for sometimes up to a year in order to represent their neighbors on the city council. In the most, was probably the most expensive city council race in Eugene. This is like Ward 1, Josh Scove and Emily Semple back in, I want to say 2018. It was the most expensive city council race in Eugene's history because it went to a runoff in May, and then they had to campaign for another 6 months, raise a bunch more money, and ultimately to come to the same conclusion that the May election had come to. So I think that's one of the reasons why both of them, both the person who won and lost that contest, have endorsed STAR voting, because it's like we ask so much of the people who are stepping up to serve, and then also that kind of the duration of that campaign cycle impacts the amount of money that you've got to dedicate to it. And of course, if you got to dedicate more money, then that means raising more money from special interests. And that's part of the whole problem.
Well, what I like about that too is it would get rid of the primary. So it just puts the election in May or whichever, you know what I mean? But you don't have that expense. The elections department doesn't have that expense. Taxpayers aren't paying that expense.
Right.
One of the things that bothers me about the current system is the two parties own it, the Democrats and the Republicans. So there are more, you and I were talking about this the other day, there are more non-affiliated voters in Oregon now than even Democrats. I mean, it's obvious there was more than Republicans, but now, so the largest population of voters in Oregon are non-committed to either party. And yet all those people pay for the primary for the Republicans and Democrats, and they can't participate fully in that unless they become one of the two, which I shouldn't have to become as an Oregonian or a Montanan, somebody that I'm not. I shouldn't have to become a Republican just so so you can spend my money.
And although and part of this, by the way, in terms of this proposal, and even the statewide petition that we have for STAR voting, does not change the structure of the partisan primary general election. Like, having witnessed that fight in 2014, you got the parties coming in saying, hey, we're private organizations and we have the right to, the freedom of assembly and to have our own candidate, that we get to choose. Ultimately, I was like, that's
right. For me,
I have a firm feeling about what I would prefer in terms of a two-stage structure, but in terms of just the root problem is the method that's used inside of each election So
Right.
the proposal on the even on the state level for Star is it's just switching out the method that we use now, which is you're limited to one choice. That's only fair if there are at most two choices, and switching it out for a system that is fair no matter how many candidates show up for office.
But would it
And
give
actually,
more? But you, if you have five choices, they might be a libertarian or a Green Party. It wouldn't just be Republicans and Democrats, right?
well, and the main reason why you are incentivized to, if you really like one of those choices in today's system, you can only, I mean, it's basically a protest vote to support them,
Right.
right? Because you're so heavily incentivized to choose one of the two major party candidates.
Right.
So I think that in some sense, a real advantage of Star is that everyone at least gets a fair count.
Right. So you would have a Green Party, a family, whoever's in the party or in the mix is all on there, and then you as a voter get to decide. Okay, I really like what the Green Party guy said. The woman who's the Democrat, I liked her a little bit better. So you're marking down your list, but that could actually give a libertarian or somebody else outside the two-party system an edge up where they could come in second or maybe even first. So you start getting some different people in there.
Yeah, and I think it does from a candidate's perspective, and I don't expect that this is going to like magically heal democracy overnight, right?
Yeah.
We're talking
No.
about, again, it's on a local level for nonpartisan races,
Right.
but the hope, and we've got a lot of evidence that suggests that this is actually what will happen, is that candidates, instead of being incentivized to just talk to the people that they already agree with, that they now have a reason to talk to everybody, right?
Right.
And in a system where you have one representative for sort of like a geographical area, what you want is a system that most fairly allows everyone in that area to have an equal say and figure out like sort of what is the consensus win between all of us, instead of like, I got to pick one of these two sides, say which team I'm on. And this is something that I've noticed, particularly of some of what I would call the politico class that have been weighing in on this measure, is the one thing that seems to really confuse the political mind. Okay. Is the idea that the voter might actually have an equal preference between multiple candidates.
See,
right?
Yeah, no,
I might be like, oh, I like both of those people. 5 stars for each of them.
Well, like, right? I know this is just for local, but I'm looking at big picture. Like, if this could change things, look at the presidential thing. You could go. I know a lot of people that are impressed with Robert Kennedy, and you go in and say, okay, I'm either Biden or Trump, and then but Robert Kennedy gets up here, and enough people. I mean, you could actually like start seeing some hope and movement in a third party or fourth party or a non-party.
And again, like, it would, at the very least, it would give him a fair count.
Right. And you could, and you as the voter, as the citizen, gets to say, you know what? I don't have to say I'm all 100% behind candidate A. I like candidate A a lot here, but B's damn good.
Well, I think it does. It also, like, that whole thing of, I've got to line up behind my politician. Like, yeah. I've got to pick, like, I'm on your team. Wait a minute. Right. You're the one who's supposed to be representing us. Like, we're the people are.
Yeah. Okay, good.
We are collectively the job interview committee for the people who represent us.
But we've let that be turned around on us, haven't we?
Right. Yeah. Well, I think it's that whole thing where you've got to, even if you've got to say, I can only express a preference order, 1, 2, 3, right? You're saying, here's my favorite, here's my second favorite, here's my third, here's who I'm lining up behind. Instead of saying, here are all of the applicants for the job. And as a voter, I get an equal say on each of them for whether or not they advance, and then a nuanced choice between them if I actually prefer one of the two finalists.
So Mark, do this for me, and for the people watching this too. I know there's been some problems with ranked voting in Alaska and places like, how can you give people really a clear, because we have time. This isn't like we have
Yeah,
to do.
yeah, yeah. Well,
How is it
let's be, I mean, to be clear, when you talk about ranked voting methods, there are dozens of different, the ballot all looks the same, right? You've got, here's my first choice, here's my second, here's my third. And people who pitch this thing that they call ranked choice voting will say, oh, ranked choice is as easy as 1, 2, 3. What they're talking about is the filling in of the bubbles, not the complexity of how those preferences are counted and turned into a winner of the election. And that's really where the system that is peddled as RCV has some real problems. So RCV is a rebrand of a 150-year-old system. It's also been called instant runoff voting. It's the Hare method. It is successively eliminating the candidate with the least number of first choice votes and then transferring those ballots to the next candidate on the ballot. And it's been, again, it's actually been adopted and repealed over the last century and change many times in the United States. And the main problem with it is that depending on the order of elimination, so your vote, ranked choice voters, voting advocates have often said, that you can express yourself honestly because if your first choice can't win, then your vote automatically transfers to your second choice. Have you heard that before?
Yeah.
It's not true. Your vote only transfers to your second choice if your second choice hangs around longer than your first choice.
Wow.
So your backup candidate, that backup preference that you expressed, because you were told it was safe to vote your honest preferences, that backup choice is only counted if your backup outlasts your favorite candidate, which means that what ends up happening, and this is what happened in Alaska, is it's a phenomenon known as center squeeze, where because the second choices of some of the voters got essentially discarded, and the second choices of other voters were counted, you end up with these in races that have 3 or more viable candidates. Ranked choice can produce wildly inaccurate results because although it allows you to express your preferences, in each round, it only ever looks at that number one spot, right? And it ignores your down ballot expressions of preference.
Now explain how STAR is different.
Well, so STAR, instead of saying first choice, second choice, third, you give stars, like 5 stars. I mean, you're like an app, right?
Right. So
rate me in the apps, right?
Mark Kronmeyer gets my 5. Rick Dancer gets
Olympic judging for voting, right? You get to look at each candidate and say, 0 bad, 5 good. If you have multiple candidates that you really like, you can give them 5s. If you say, I only want to vote for, I want to give full support to every candidate on my team and 0 to all the other ones, you can do that. If there's only one candidate you like, if you want to vote just like you vote today, you just give your one favorite 5 stars and you move on. Or if you're like, hey, I like anybody on this ballot except for that one candidate I really don't like, you can give everyone 5s and that one candidate is 0. Right. And that's it's actually because of that that it's an equally weighted ballot, right? The person who gives 5 stars to one candidate and the person who gives 5 stars to everybody except that one candidate, those 2 ballots have exactly equal power.
Yeah.
Because when you add them both into the mix, they balance each other out.
So I know you're getting some bad, like that doesn't happen all the time with anything, but I know that it's taken some hits. It makes people nervous. It makes people very uneasy.
And look, I mean, I think just straight up, like, it is a proposal to change the system that we use to elect the people who make our public policy choices at the city. And I mean, when you're living in the city, that's arguably as important or more important than any other election.
Right.
in terms of impact on daily life. So I do think that fair consideration and thought about transitioning to a new system is definitely warranted. I think what has been particularly, I mean, kind of a little frustrating is just that I don't think that, particularly from our sort of organized opposition, that is the people who put in the official opposing statement in the voters guide, those I don't feel that the arguments are necessarily being made in good faith, and are certain kind of cloak the origin, which is to say the organizers against Eugene's star voting measure for local offices are Portland organizers for ranked choice voting. And you can go to the Secretary of State site and see all the details on the campaign finance reporting. But there's this, I think in part because of the same, I would say a great many of us look at our political system and go, this is messed up. Yeah. And I think more and more people are doing that and have sort of latched on to ranked choice because it's got good marketing messages. But sort of as a result, they look at a new thing as, well, let's not let that be competition to, it's the old refrain, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good or something like that. I think the whole point is that the star was invented because there just wasn't a method that was providing something that was good enough.
So it is interesting that's coming out of Portland, when this only impacts Eugene. Correct. Because obviously whenever something like that happens for me, I think, what are you afraid of? And if this is tried in Eugene and it works, it could be a real game changer. And I'm looking at this bigger picture, and I know you don't want to make it like, but I mean, imagine if this does work in Eugene on this lower level, which, as you say, that's where everything starts. But then you start moving it into other systems. That could be a real game changer and answer a lot of questions that people have right now that say, how come we live in this diverse country? And I'm going to get a little bit nasty here. This does not reflect Mark, and all we have is two old white men in close to 80 that are eligible to be, the parties have decided that's our choice. And right. I think people are looking at this going, no, this is not the right way. And so, yes, I know this starting in Eugene isn't going to change things, but how do things get started? How do things start changing? Is I think when people start feeling like they have power again to make a choice that isn't A or B. You know what I mean? We're so diverse. It's like we love C's and D's, but right now C's and D's and E's and F's can't get on there because it's up to the two major power sources, and I think that's probably what scares people. And I think with the voters, what bothers me is I think they're not checking it out enough. I'll do this little clip for when you guys read something in the voters pamphlet, those are paid ads. Let me just tell you, I ran for Secretary of State. A lot of that stuff in there is paid ads by people who want to twist get you to believe what they believe. So you need to do your homework and really look at who's writing those, where they come from, before you just start going, well, look how many people said no. You know what I mean? But
I would just say that I do think, and this is part of the goal of just educating on what is the system, right? Like right. What is star voting? And right. there is no substitute for actually trying it. So particularly for people who are watching it now, you can go to the web, and I don't know if you can bring up, infographics on the editing of this, but like, if you just go to the website star.vote, you can create your own star voting election and see exactly how it's balloted, see exactly how it's counted. And what you'll find is that, and what I've found in talking to, thousands of people about this method, is that the 0 to 5 scale is really well understood. The automatic runoff between the two who get the highest scores and then using the scores as the preferences, that it definitely causes the politico mind to start, boiling and then steam comes out and your eyes glaze, all that kind of stuff. But if once you realize all that that's doing is just making sure that when you express a difference in preference, that's a meaningful expression, right? So whether if the top two finalists, if you gave one a 5 and one a 4, your full vote goes to the one you gave a 5.
Right.
If you didn't like either of them, but you gave one a 1 and one a 0, your full vote goes to the 1. So you can use that ballot. It can help prevent your worst outcome at the same time as always giving full support for the outcome that you really want.
Yeah, for that person that really is, number A is my one choice. That's all I want. I don't want a second preference choice. Then just put all 5 stars to that one person, and your vote is going to be counted as you want. But there's a lot of people like you and me and others, I think, who are saying, this is my number one choice. But if this one doesn't win, I wouldn't be right. Sad this one won. And so then, and I think, doesn't that also, Mark, what I kind of like on the sidebars, that is, you're going to feel like, well, see, my voice was heard because my second choice person actually got voted in. Whether I think right now, the reason so many people, I love when we hear, 56% of people voted. Well, that's 56% of the registered people voted. And on top of the registered, there's thousands and thousands of people that aren't even participating because they feel like they're not being heard. This could help bring that voice back.
And I've actually had people tell me, like, I will start voting again if this is the way that we vote, right? There's so many people that have gotten so disillusioned with this. It's the polarized two different sets of special interest aggregating to get to 50% plus 1, instead of, could I have 3 good choices on the ballot? That would be amazing.
Yeah.
How about 4? Right? If the 2 finalists, I gave them both a 5, like, I win both ways.
Right.
And then all the rest of the voters, if they had a preference between those two, then whoever gets the most preference on the, it helps really helps us find where we agree instead of amplifying where we disagree.
Right. And I still think it's awesome too, even if my second choice or my third, I could say, well, I did have a say in that. I did put something down and that person got it. So I was part of that process, which is, I think, super important mentally and spiritually and all that other stuff, where you're, build some importance back into the voting, rather than right now. I think it's, people are doing it. They're just, it's because most people are voting against somebody, and we should be voting for people, not against them. And you know what I mean? I think that happens a lot, and it would be nice.
I think the whole voting against versus, like, voting defensively to prevent your worst outcome, and to do that in a way where you also vote against your true preference, is such a turnoff for so many people to the political process. It's like you're basically, it's a manufactured consent to the status quo in a certain sense, right?
And you'd walk away not feeling good about it. You know what I mean?
Right.
You don't. I think so many people vote and they just like, well, I wasn't going to happen anyway. You know what I mean? And we have to stop that.
And to think that the state of our present state of political reality comes from running that broken process over and over and over and over and over and over again for 200 plus years. So, healing it is definitely going to take some time, but it's sort of like all of these things that we experience in our political reality now. They're things that the founders of the country were aware of and warned us about, right? Yeah. The dangers of faction and the need to have representatives that represented the people as a whole, instead of representing special interests over the people as a whole.
I just read a book about George Washington, and it's so weird, Mark, because, and I'm sure you already know this too, and a lot of history people do, but everything we're going through right now is exactly what they were concerned about, how this was going to work, and the parties were going to ruin, it's going to split this stuff up. And I mean, and it's really weird to read this and go, oh my God, here it is. And this is, and I know the same thing's been going on. It didn't just happen overnight, but you're seeing it so blatant right now where I have so many friends who are saying, I don't even pay attention anymore. I just want a peaceful life. And I'm going, you can't have a peaceful life by not participating in the political process, because I mean, it makes no sense to me. And that's why this kind of, even if it flopped, which I don't think it will, and it's kind of cool. It'd be kind of cool if it started in Eugene. I mean, just because I was, I was there, you were born there, I mean, it'd be kind of cool. We've started a lot of really cool things in Oregon, and we've started some kind of stupid things in Oregon. This would be something I think that would be really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, Oregon has really, I mean, if you look historically in terms of particularly around election and political reform, Oregon has been out in front, for 100+ years.
Right.
Going all the way back to the initiative system itself, which was, that was called the Oregon system for a long time. We were the first to get vote by mail done, motor voter, right? So all of these, sort of forward-looking, more inclusive processes for citizen engagement. And I definitely see STAR as that kind of next big leap, which is not looking so much at the structure of the campaign cycle, but more like inside of each election, how do we really show that it is mathematically fair and give everyone an equal and very expressive way of saying what they want for the future.
Well, and I think the other thing to bring up again too is for people that get so tired of, we have the primary season and then we have the general election. This would not only cut back on costs for the elections department, because you have one election, you're not having all these. It cuts back on campaign spending, which all of us are concerned about that to a degree. I mean, they could still spend it all here, but one fewer elections it could all help with some of those little things that we all get so perturbed about.
Totally. Well, and you think about countries that can elect their prime minister after a 1-month campaign cycle, and here we are, our president's a year and a half beforehand. But also, again, to reiterate, this is for our local offices. So right. I think that, and people have, I think, rightly pointed out that when you start to get to higher offices, you want more time, perhaps some filtration process. Could be a party primary, could be an open field primary. That I see as sort of an orthogonal issue to the question of, within each election, how do we make sure it's fair?
Right. But just start somewhere. And that's where this could open the door to something bigger, which could solve some of those problems, you hope.
Democracy invented in Eugene. Hey.
So you're a 16-year-old kid.
Let
me just ask you this. So your dad got screwed out of a great election. He would have been an amazing governor. And now you create help, with a lot of help from a lot of other people, create this system. What do you think your dad would be saying right now?
Well, it's when I was doing the unified primary, that was right when he was in the process of dying of cancer. And so I actually I don't know what he would say right now, but I do know that he was actually the guy who came up with that test of balance as sort of almost really part of the constitutional justification for methods that provide, how do we show that a voting method provides equal weight to all the voters? And that test of balance of, can I balance your expression so that we know that the system is providing us equal power, which is to say, whichever way you express yourself on the ballot, is there a way I can balance that out so that the election result is the same whether both of us or neither of us voted?
Right.
And that came from my dad, like right at the conclusion of the unified primary campaign, and led to the creation of the Equal Vote Coalition. And this, of course, is before star voting was even conceived. But he was, he was a constitutional scholar going way back, and I actually had the real privilege of working with him on. This is an amicus filing for a federal case in 2014, where we sort of first put that equal vote argument into the federal court record. So, hopefully he's pleased.
I think it's got to feel good though, as a kid, because I was so such a big part of your life when the campaign and all that stuff going on, and you've been diligent about working your way through different things, from the open primary to this, now to the voting, finding the problem. I bet he'd be smiling. I bet he'd be pretty excited. And who knows? You know how things happen. Hopefully the voters will give it a shot. I mean, it's my show. I can say that. I have no.
Well, again, I would just say to everyone out there who's looking at this, there are a lot of messages out there from smart people saying they think it's going to confuse other people. But I think that where it really dispels the confusion factor is when you try it once or twice in an online poll. You can just go, oh, favorite 5, least favorite 0. If I've got, if a third candidate is closer to the 0, maybe I give them a 1. If they're very close to the 5, maybe I give them a 4. But it takes so much of this strategy calculus that is in our current system, where I've got to go, well, who that I barely tolerate has the best shot of beating the candidate I truly despise? And how do I know in advance? Like, all of that really challenging calculus and manipulation goes out the window.
Right. So is starvoting.com, is that right?
It's so you can run a test election at star.vote.
Okay, star.vote.
There's a bunch of information at starvoting.org. The funny thing about starvoting.com is it was reserved by supporters of ranked choice voting. So they have not yet yielded that web domain up to advocates of star voting. Thanks, guys.
Okay, so everybody out there, go just tonight, or go create your own little election.
Yeah, and actually, I put one up there. One of the top ones on the recent polls is our current mayor's race. It's done in star voting, right? So we've got 3 people running for mayor. If none of them get greater than 50%, then 2 of them are going to have to run another whole election. So if you want to see what would happen if that were to be able to be accomplished in one fair step, you can just go to star.vote, and it's, I think, one of the top recent polls on the site.
Mark, that's a good idea, because that's kind of exciting. And then when are you going to give those? You should watch what happens in the actual results and then show yours. Now, I think that didn't Eugene Weekly use this to do their best of thing?
They did a best of in 2018, and that was with the Lane County measure. And I think actually the fact that people had a chance to use it in the weekly in Eugene is one of the reasons why Eugene voters voted in favor of that measure in 2018. We didn't have, that it was a total grassroots, nickel and dime campaign. So we didn't have the outreach to go outside of Eugene very far. And so the less people knew about it and the less they'd had a chance to use it. That's what I attribute its failure to pass countywide. But again, the hope here is it's like if it is at all sort of unfamiliar or seems confusing, just try it a couple of times and see if you still feel the same way.
Yeah. Mark Frohnmeyer, thank you so much for just all that. I love how you're taking this step by step and finding better ways to, because I know it's a passion of yours, and I think there's nothing more invigorating and powerful than people watching other people live out their passion. And
well, it's it's one of those things that can't. And thank you, by the way. It's great to see you again. It's been too long. I think this the electoral process it's just, it's so, it's so fundamental to so many aspects of our lives. And, we're just, it was like, how do we really do this in a way that's fair? And then of course, once you have the idea, that's not enough. You got to like really test it and vet it and put it out there. And then it gets beat up on. You have to say, well, was that is that a fair argument, or is that actually kind of making our point?
Right.
In the first place. But ultimately it's up to the people to decide, which is what's also so cool, is like the people of Eugene are the ones who get to make this call about how do we as a city want to vote. And I appreciate everyone here giving it a look, no matter which way you end up landing on the ballot. But
go vote early, have fun, go do a little vote early here and see what happens. All right, Mark, thank you so much for your time, man.
Thanks,
all right,
Rick.
we'll see you later. We'll see you later.